Welcome to the Falmouth Art Center's May virtual art reception. I'm Laura Reckford, Executive Director of the Falmouth Art Center, and we are recording today's session because we have several people, and here's two people joining right now. We have several people who have said at the last minute they were not able to make it, and so we'll be able to send them a recording of the session. We've been doing these virtual art receptions, and many of you have been along with us for all of these. We've been doing them since September, and it's really been a lot of fun. It's been a great way to meet the artists who are currently displaying work here at the Falmouth Art Center, put a little context around the shows, our lights, in order to understand the life cycle of these basic building blocks of life. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm really enjoying this project. As Laurie said, my name is Heather Stivison, and I'm working with Noah. And I want to share my screen, so give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. So I wanted to start a little bit to tell you about myself. I'm originally from New Jersey, where I worked as a museum director for a number of years, and I've moved up to Massachusetts fairly recently to go to UMass Dartmouth and complete an MFA in painting, as opposed to being someone looking at the work and talking about the work. I would be making the work. But I've actually been a creator all my life. I worked in any number of fields in art and have done a ton of work. This is a little corner of my studio. This is the neat corner, and you can see I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I work in all kinds of media, painting, ink, fiber sculpture, found objects, and have been having a blast since I got back to my studio time. Most of my artwork relates to either feminism or the environment, two topics that interest me a great deal. And the place where I'm most comfortable in my work is sort of standing on the threshold between abstraction and reality. So I use elements of reality or realism so that I can draw a viewer in who may not have an interest or knowledge of full abstraction. And then they can spend a little more time looking at the work, and they may see something else. And it offers me the chance to bring a new perspective and offer new dialogues and new ideas in my work. In the past few years, my work has been exhibited in universities, galleries, and museums, both nationally and internationally, and that's been very exciting. My environmental paintings are mostly derived from my responses to water, clouds, and constellations. But as you can see from this work, I'm not trying to recreate or illustrate the places. I want to paint something that I feel from it, something that is unseen. And my work is often inspired by poetry. I use an awful lot of layers of semi-transparent oil paint and try to invite the eye to travel around and through the paint and to encourage a little contemplation. And in relation to Deb's project before, this one, you can see the line here, this separation of the two worlds. This is not part of what I plan to say, but this is related to the hot zones in the ocean, and it was the deterioration of the coast that I was talking about. So I thought it was interesting seeing your work on that same topic. And I often create in the abstractions a sort of unsettling depth, something that is can be a little bit disturbing. You're not really sure what you're looking at, or it can be dreamlike or sometimes nightmare-like. The most important subject in my work has been water, and it has been water for several years. In addition to its central role in life, it plays an essential role in the spiritual lives of humans. We think of it in baptisms and cleansing rituals and in sacred ceremonies. And it's incredibly mysterious because when we look at water, we don't actually see the water. It's colorless, it's formless. So what we see is, here you see the reflections of the sky or the world around it, or here you can look through it. and you see what is tinting the water, the chemicals within it, or what is beneath the water. And so in my work, I've been calling these the mirrors and the windows. And this project is particularly interesting to me because it looks into the windows of the ocean with the eyes of the scientist to see the secret world that's beneath it. And science is something that has always been important to me. I've been around it my whole life. This is my dad. He was a research scientist in physics. And on the right is my daughter. She's a molecular biologist at Vanderbilt University now. So the Synergy Project, which blends art and science and focuses on water, was the perfect fit for my work. So this sort of brings me to this other section of my studio, the messier section. And you can see some of the work that is based on water. And you'll notice that a lot of it is based on the surface patterns. And this is the beginning of one of the works that's in the exhibit now, and a much earlier version of another one that's in the exhibit now. And I did focus generally, before meeting Noah, on the mirrors, the reflections, the patterns. But as I began to learn about Noah's research, I was excited to find that his 4 areas in the ocean, the places that he's getting his samples, would give us into the window of the life of unseen chemicals in the ocean. The very idea of the life of a chemical was intriguing. And to know that all of this was happening and we couldn't see it and I could somehow represent it in abstract art was very exciting. So I decided to create 4 paintings, 4 large-scale paintings, each one based on his 4 collection sites, beginning with a coastal surface water. Noah described this site as active water, full of movement, with vibrant areas of bloom and bust, rich in mixtures of both land-derived and oceanic molecules. And he said this is where we would find pharmaceuticals and pollutants and harmful toxins, and where nutrients are often amplified by human activity. And he called it a green algae-filled mess. So this is where I started with the mess. And the more he described the chemical life in this zone, the more I saw these wild and crazy colors and textures in my mind. So I painted these chemicals as kind of living communities and all sort of connecting with each other and overlapping, but as different communities. And the surface paint you'll see is bumpy and rough, with evidence of growth and the interconnectedness of these chemicals. And eventually I had this abstraction of entire communities of chemicals that we don't see with our eyes. And I was pleased with that, but I knew that nobody would look at this and have any idea that it was underwater. So I needed something to trigger the idea of water in our minds. So going back to the concept of the windows and mirrors, I decided to create these sort of cloud-like forms, paint them right on the top. And these imaginary shapes work in such a way that our human mind recognizes that this represents water, that it represents the surface of the water, even though they're just imaginary forms. And even though it's a total abstraction, it bears no real physical relation to water. We see it as water. We can even feel it as wet. Noah's second collection zone is also surface water, but it's far out in the ocean, and it could not have been more different. He found that there really wasn't much of anything in that water except salt, and we spoke of this as an ocean desert. So here's the earliest iteration of the second panel. I laid in a foundation of paint that is not textured. You can see the canvas is fairly smooth, and the colors are gradually graded from the warm to the cool. And that change in color represents the oscillation that he described between day and night, and in particular, the dissolved riboflavin that is found near the surface in the safety of the night, but then that retreats down below when the sun comes up again. He described the metabolites as being like speech, and I love this. He says they're full of information, easily assimilated and transient in nature. They tend to be used almost as soon as they are released and don't accumulate much. This, along with his other desert-type descriptions, including a comparison to tumbleweed, made me think of the sun-dried bones in an actual desert. They're full of biological information they break down, they get bleached in the relentless sunlight. So I wanted to underscore that desert concept. And I took those original lines that represented the water and it made them look more like bones. And eventually I took some images of the interior of bones, microscopic images, and you'll see them in the later version of this painting. This painting has none of the communities of active life that was found in the other coastal painting. You'll see some heat, you'll see a sense of loneliness, and if you get very close, you'll see some marks. It doesn't show up as well in this picture as it does in the real painting. But when you look at the marks, the temptation is to just wipe them off, like there's something that doesn't belong there. But they're intentional, and they refer to the degradation products of marine molecules, marine microbes that he spoke about. So the finished painting, you can see the interior of the bones up here. And it looks deceptively simple when it's compared to the other panel, but there's a lot of storytelling going on. The warm and cool colors that I mentioned before, and the reference to deserts and bones are part of it. But there's also a sense of directional movement of the water. You sense it going off to the one side, and the feel of the waving and the bobbing surface, and the receding patterns give you a little bit of a sense of the vastness of the space. And both of these paintings, the scale is really important to me. When completed, the whole series will include 4 of these 5-foot paintings, and it will require the visitors to physically walk from zone to zone, and they can move up close and get some look into the windows, and then they can step back and get a sense of the size of the ocean. Both of the paintings use fantasy abstractions that somehow our human brain comprehends to represent the water. I'm very interested in distilling the subjective world into color, form, and light, and exploring how our brain responds and how we read the visual language of art. I hope the work spark conversations about the relationships between art and science and remind us of the value of seeking to understand our world better. So I'd like to turn this over to Noah for just a minute to get a few thoughts from him.
Great, and I will remove the spotlight on you. Thank you, Heather. And I'm going to spotlight Noah, who I think is here. Here he is. Okay, let me get that going. There we go. Hello, Noah.
Hi. I guess to begin, I'm Noah. I'm a third-year PhD student in the joint program studying chemical oceanography. You heard a little bit about that from Heather. Specifically, one of the things that I'm interested in is what's in the water and why is it there at the concentrations that it is. And we can have an answer for that spans geologic timescales when we're talking about things like chloride, sodium, the stuff that makes the ocean salty, things that are common and stay there for a long time. But when it comes to these transient chemical species, the organic chemicals, things that your body might recognize, amino acids, nucleotides, the building blocks of cells, we see that those are there even at vanishingly small concentrations, even in the surface ocean near Bermuda, in the middle of the Atlantic, where it's hard for a lot of microbes to live. And the presence of these biomolecules there is the focus of my research. And one of the things that I'm interested in is the fact that these chemicals are all reactive characters themselves. Oftentimes what we view them as is something where one cell might need more of something and one cell might produce an excess of something, and they form a network of interacting characters that are shooting chemicals back and forth. But what oftentimes we fail to consider is what happens to those chemicals when they're in the water. There are things that I'm studying, for example, a lot of the nucleotides, things that make up your DNA, or tryptophan, an amino acid, that absorb light. If you have sunlight shining on them, they can actually absorb some of that radiation and react, becoming perhaps something new or something that a cell would not recognize. And so some of the fundamental questions that my research is asking is, if you live in the surface ocean, are you competing with physical chemistry to obtain nutrients you need to live? That's a lot of what's going on here, but for this project, Heather has been doing a tremendous amount of learning about about microbial ecosystems, about how they work in different places, and about the stuff of life in the ocean. What I've been trying to do, in addition to that, is take some of the data that I have, which is chemical data. It comes off of a machine called a liquid chromatography coupled mass spectrometry apparatus, and convert that data, which just tells you relatively how much of these chemicals are in the water in a sample that you took. And I've taken those relative measures of abundance and converted them to music by taking things that are more abundant and saying this corresponds to a higher, a more intense pitch, and things that are less abundant and say, well, these correspond to lower pitches, and arranging them to hopefully have something musical. These are not on display yet, and they're still a work in progress, but like Heather mentioned, there are going to be 4 paintings, and eventually there will be accompanying music. Here's a sample of what one of those looks like. And the recordings are in progress, so I'm very excited about all of that.
Very fascinating. And I'm sure people have questions for Heather and Noah. And I'm watching the chat here and also the gallery to see if any hands are up. Questions for Heather and Noah who are here. Oh, I see a question from Paul Lombardozzi. Paul, you want to take yourself off mute there?
I have a question for Noah. Is there an interdependency from some sea life that's dependent upon those chemicals that you see, and are they excrements of sea life that add to those chemical bodies that you find?
Yes, it is a complex and messy network. And the weird thing is that down at the level of like single-celled plankton, you have situations that are kind of funny. Like there are these dominant phytoplankton that might be there, like kind of like single-celled plants that live in the ocean, doing the photosynthesis that forms that first biomass, the primary production that everything else depends upon. And one of the things that's funny about them is that there are many phytoplankton species that can't produce the B vitamins they need to live. They have to get those from bacteria, and the bacteria might excrete them. They might produce them inside the cells, but then blow up when they get infected by a virus and scatter that stuff to the wind. And then there's also some just absolutely fascinating research going on about basically, like, do copepods, like tiny little shrimpy looking things, do they pee out these nutrients when they go down to depth to hide out during the day? Yeah. So they come from a lot of places, and not everyone can make the ingredients they need to live.
How broad do you have to research under the things that you're studying into the oceans? I mean, are the components in various parts of the ocean, do they differ a whole lot?
They do.
Like, yeah, okay.
And this is one of the things that, like, when Heather was showing off kind of the surface ocean in the oligotrophic, like nutrient poor gyre region in the middle of the ocean versus the coast, it is often that, especially fueled by higher concentrations of nutrients, like raw ingredients, nitrogen and phosphorus, that you're able to support ecosystems that will give you a much higher concentration of this stuff in the ambient water. If I pull a sample of water from the beach here in Cape Cod, I get 6 times as many visible chemicals in my measurements or something than I do if I take one from the middle of the ocean.
Thank you.
Very good. Other questions for Noah or Heather? So thank you to everyone for coming tonight, and especially my hats off to all the presenters, to Mesha and Greg and Lori and Deb and Heather, and of course for Caroline and Svenja and Noah. And we're just so pleased to have so many of the artists and scientists here. And we'll certainly look forward to continuing to enjoy these wonderful pieces. And I know for me, and I've been looking very closely at them for a couple of weeks now, this has just added so much to my understanding of them. Here's another comment: fabulous program, creative people on all levels, opened up a whole new world to us all. And I think that's definitely the case. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. We hope we'll see you around here at the Falmouth Art Center. Come by, we're open every day, free, and send your friends and family over to see these 3 amazing exhibits, 4 exhibits if we count the Circe show, which is also here. And here's another comment: as a fellow Synergy artist, I'm inspired by what you are doing. I think we're all inspired today. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. We hope to see you soon, and have a great night. Thank you all.